topic is balancing career and family. If you're like us, not independently wealthy, you have to have a career to bring something of a monetary value into the home. And how do we balance that is this topic with our family time. So what, first of all, is the role of a career or careers in your marriage?
Speaking specifically for Heather and I, we kind of always been on the same page with this. For us, this might sound pretty like a Mr. Obvious statement, but for us, a career is just that it's a way to provide for our family, and really nothing more. I mean, I know everybody's mindset and goals and things are different. For Heather and I, our choice is to have jobs that obviously can provide for our family, where we're comfortable and don't have to worry about those things. But that also maximizes our ability to be home, both of us. And that's not speaking anything against people who have other types of jobs, but that's just a kind of decision we've made. Specifically for her, I mean, she has that ability, works teacher schedule, and has all this time off. But for me too, I haven't wanted a job or pursued jobs where I was going to knowingly, have to work long hours for super long extended periods of time, or have jobs that's going to take me away from the home. For me, part of that comes from my dad, who I love and did so much for me, but he was gone a lot with the job he had, he was helping provide for our family, so I don't hold anything against him. But there was part of that, and he was there, helped soccer and other things, but I can vividly remember him going to work, and I might not, on a Monday, and I might not see him till like Wednesday afternoon, just because of when he came in and then when he had to leave again. And that, it does kind of take a toll on you a little bit as a kid, that, okay, so for me, if I could help it, I tried to have a job where I was able to provide for my family, take care of those needs, but still have a chance to be home as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. My dad, it sounded like you were describing my dad working. And even though I do at times work long hours, it's not the extended, it's not every week. And I was in a career at one point where that was more the case. And it's like, can't do that. I need to change, positions, change roles, because I need to be home. I need to be home more often to support her, and to be there with the kids. Because money is one thing. It's necessary to survive, but that time of being with the family and talking to them and training them, showing that the Lord is important. If I'm not home to demonstrate or to illustrate that God's important, then how are my children supposed to know that God's important? How's my spouse supposed to know? We can't allow. I don't want my career to dictate what my family life is and what my service is. The old adage is no one on their deathbed says, "I wish I would have worked more hours." I won't put myself in that position to even have that as a thought down the road.
And that obviously comes from 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8. I believe, if you not provide for his own, especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So, obviously it's a command, and it's not necessarily that I'm like, okay, what's the least amount of work I can do to provide for my family? It's just my family, to me, is way above my career and my career accomplishments. And we were talking about, you sit down and people say, where do you see yourself in 5-10 years? And for Heather and I both, it's where we're both kind of like working and taking care of our family. Like I don't, some men might think it's really crazy, but for me, I don't have where I want to be in 10 years. Like I want to have a job that allows me to provide for my family and be home, and those things. And generally be more financially stable than where maybe I am now, if possible. But like that's just not my mindset. So, to try to take care of what God asked me to take care of, which is provide for my family, but also, I'm supposed to be the leader of their home, which that's really hard to do if you're not in the home. So
I was going to say, God has commanded us to work to take care of our own. Sometimes that's a one income time. Sometimes it's a two family income. Sometimes both spouses have to do that. But that's another one of those conversations that has to take place before you get married.
absolutely.
And what you believe. I love that you said the two of you sat down together and made those decisions, because sometimes that doesn't happen. And being a teacher or having that kind of schedule where you have summers off and those things are also important and helps. And when you look at how long do you intend to work, do you intend to work until the day you die, or are you able to set something aside for retirement so that you have that time? That varies couple to couple. So I think it's a conversation for everything. But because we're commanded to work, whether we're working at a job and bringing money in to support the family, or we're working at home, we need to find something that we enjoy doing so that our attitude towards it isn't drudgery. Because with that drudgery comes bitterness can end up being bitterness towards our family. If we didn't have all these mouths to feed, I wouldn't have to work so hard. Or if you didn't want a new dress every 5 days, or whatever. Children, stop growing so fast. I can't keep up. Those things are important. So we have to find enjoyment, or at least be happy that God's given us the ability to work and provide for our family.
That background feeling, when early in our marriage, I was still in the retail environment, and I thought I was faking the funk pretty good around Christmas time. Apparently, I wasn't. She said I wasn't the nicest person. I wasn't as jovial as I ought to be.
I remember telling him, I grabbed his face, I go, I would really love to know what you look like happy at your job. And he just looked at me and he's like, well, I know what I can do to be happy, but it requires something out of you. And I already had left the medical field, went into corporate, left that because we had JD, and literally it was cheaper for me to stay home than to pay the daycare. And he's like, I want to take the CPA exam. He had never taken it. I'm like, okay, that means you have to learn how to study again. You have to stay home. I'm like, I know how we can do it. And he looked at me like, graveyards in the OR. I'll do graveyards. You take the test. It'll work out. It'll be fine. But you have to be willing to make those compromises. You can't sit there and say, well, I'm sorry you're not happy, but go.
I never had a desire to be anything more than a classroom teacher. I coached for a while, a lot of time away, but I was very happy in the classroom, and that's where I wound up. Linda, on the other hand, was very happy in the classroom, but she found out that she had a gift in teaching teachers. And she went around the country training teachers in various different topics. And she got coerced, encouraged, interested in another degree. And so we decided that she would do that. Now, she often says that she lost about 2 years, doesn't remember a lot of things that went on because she was studying. I know there were times when we took vacations and she spent most of it studying and writing papers, but that is what stimulated her. And now that is over, and we have more time for family and more time for doing things. But in the whole scheme of things, each family has to decide and determine to what level these sacrifices on either side, you working the graveyard shift, okay, which is tons of fun,
So much fun.
and things of that nature. But we've got to provide for our family. We've got to, obviously, support the Lord's work. We have to be prepared somewhat for emergencies and needs of children and needs of parents and needs of others. But we also need to be satisfied in what we do, whatever that may be.
What you were saying about, having to make sacrifices, and whether it's temporary or for longer, and having those conversations before you get married. I remember when we were expecting, or when Heather was pregnant with Vivian, I talked to several men that were here at West Main. One of them's not here anymore, but he gave me great advice. He said, they had 2 girls, and they always told them and tried to prepare them for, you need to be able to help provide for your family, because it'd be great for you to marry someone who wants to be a doctor or whatever, right, that makes a lot of money. But you may end up, the man that you love, that you want to be with, may be a mechanic, which nowadays mechanics might actually make a lot of money. But his point was, you have to be able to help, or something might happen. So I think those are conversations you have to have, right? Of what are expectations, just in general, and what if something happened. You have to be able to come to the table with somehow to help provide for the family if needed, right? Or if that's how your family is going to be set up.
Sometimes careers take you away. You both mentioned your dad's traveling. My dad traveled a lot. Some careers that people have, when you're home. Others bring that briefcase in and still have more work to do. So in making those choices, those are also considerations. How much time? I know when I went back to teaching after staying home with my kids for a long time, there was just a lot to learn. Things had changed in 8 years. But I would come home, we would do our family evening, kids went to bed, and that's when I would do what I needed to do to prepare for the next day or learn something new. You're going to make sacrifices, whether I'm married to a spouse who's the worker, the financial worker, and I'm the one that's staying home. If he's having to travel, I need to make there's sacrifices that are going to be made. I've got to pull up the slack. When you're both working, you both come in. I mean, we have roles in our home, but you come together and you've got to work together and help each other. It can't only be your job to be sure that the 3 girls are fed, bathed, and in bed, homework done on time. It takes 2 of us. That's the whole point that you're spending that time at home. So whatever the couple decides is their goals, the career that's chosen, or the work, or the way they split up things has to come into check. For the end result is we all get to heaven, regardless of the job we do.
Well, if 2 truly come together as one, then there isn't a his job,
Right.
her job. It's our job.
Right.
So,
One thing that Linda came up with as we were filling this out was that you need quality time, but you also need quantity. And when you're home and you're spending this time, we really need to be present when we're there. We can't just turn on that Cyclops and stare into it mindlessly all the time, but we need to be present and active with the family. But one thing we haven't mentioned is about building or choosing a career. We've touched on it some, about building and choosing a career in regard to the demands it makes on our family. We talked about, I worked 7 and 7 for a while. I was gone 7 days, home 7 days. I had another job where I worked 14, 12 and 2. I had every other weekend off. Okay. So there were situations where I was not able to attend services. I've also had a job in which it was suggested that I may not need to tell the exact truth all the time. Didn't have that long. Honesty wasn't high on the priority list. And then there's time to study, time to interact with the family. So there are other things to consider as well in choosing or climbing that ladder or having that career totally fulfilled by the number of zeros on the paycheck.
Yeah, because there can be a career that you know, if you're young, you're looking at what to do. From your vantage point, it might look really appealing. You look at a doctor. Your general practitioner, you might see, oh, their office is only open 4 days a week, from 10 to 6. It's like, that's not bad. If I'm a doctor, I'm home 3 days a week. I'm there every evening. Sounds great. Okay. But you also need to see how many years of not those hours it takes before you get there. Is that what you want to do? It may not be a great choice. It may be okay. It depends on where you could still be single that whole time. Maybe it works out fine. But yeah, you gotta, and it's difficult. And I remember when I was young, I was so smart when I was young. I knew just about everything. I wouldn't have taken the time to go ask someone advice because I already knew. And it's like one of those things. If I had to do over again, I would try to be a lot more humble and ask questions of people who may or may not know, and talk to them about what they think of different careers, or talk to people who are in those careers and what they went through to get there. And is that something that will fit into what I really need to be fitting it into, versus it looks like a great job, a great career. Let's do it. But I was not that way when I was young. I will wholeheartedly admit that. But that's something that with our children, we're trying to instill that in them, so they have that different thought process, a more accurate, more correct thought process on what they choose to do.
So there's a lot of behind the scenes situations that are involved in almost every profession. I can tell you from personal experience that sometimes doctors are in the hospitals at 5 o'clock in the morning to come by and see you, and are sometimes there 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night and on weekends.
Yep. Well, you talked about coaching. Mm-hmm. That was something I would have loved to have been a coach. If one thing hadn't worked out, I probably would have gone the teaching route so I could be a coach. But you also mentioned how many hours, and it's all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, they spend a lot of hours. And if they're in football, especially in this area, what family? Where I was from, even like baseball, it's like you're out there how many hours every day. And even on some of the weekends, you're still playing games or you're doing tournaments, and it's probably much better that I never went that route, but yeah, it's hard to think of that when you're young, but it's an important thing to think about.
It's probably one of the best pieces of advice I got. My dad was a defensive football coach. I probably know way more than a girl should know about defensive patterns in place. I still love medicine. I was like, I'll be a sports medicine. I'll work for a sports team. This will be great. And my mom, you'll miss first steps. You'll miss pageants. You'll miss awards assemblies. Because you might have to be in the OR doing surgery on somebody's meniscus. Or all these things you want to get. And we hadn't even got to church yet, but just everyday life. She's like, are you going to be able to find a... And she, because we lived in a small town, and she grew up in a certain era, but she's like, is your husband at some point going to resent you? Because they're stuck pulling all the weight. She's like, I'm not deterring you from medicine, but I'm just saying, taking the big picture and not the tunnel, your dream. You're like, because you're going to go from me to we. And how does the we fit into the me?
Well, we'll wrap this up and go to the final section, the one for which Linda and I were invited to be here, and that is on aging.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook for more content like this.